Welcome to our deep dive into the link between substance use and criminal behavior. You've given us some really interesting research to work with. And some of these real life examples we're going to uncover are honestly pretty shocking.
It is a fascinating area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we often hear about that link between substance use and crime, but this deep dive, I think, will help us go a bit beyond that simple idea of cause and effect.
Okay, so let's get started then with the science. How do alcohol and drugs actually impair brain function to the point where someone might engage in criminal behavior? I remember reading something about the prefrontal cortex, but can you break that down?
Yeah, you're on the right track there. The prefrontal cortex is definitely key. That's the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control.
Yeah.
You know, basically keeping your behavior in check.
Right.
Think of it as like your brain's braking system.
Okay.
When substances like alcohol enter the picture, they essentially cut the brake lines. Alcohol in particular, it disrupts the prefrontal cortex's ability to function correctly.
Hmm.
And that leads to those impulsive actions and potentially criminal behavior.
So it's not just about people losing their inhibitions or acting out of character when they're drinking. It's like alcohol is actually targeting a specific part of the brain that's crucial for making good decisions.
Exactly. And the consequences can be dire.
Yeah.
One really shocking example that highlights this is the case of a man who, under the influence of meth, committed a robbery and later claimed to have absolutely no memory of the event.
Oh, wow.
His brain was so impaired by the drug, he wasn't even consciously aware of his actions.
That's a scary thought. And it also brings up that question of accountability, but maybe that's a discussion for another time. For now, let's kind of shift gears and look specifically at alcohol-related crime. We hear about it all the time, but what's the reality statistically speaking?
Yeah, the statistics are pretty alarming. In some countries, alcohol is involved in up to 60% of violent crimes.
Wow.
So imagine 2 out of every 3 violent incidents.
That's a lot.
That's how pervasive this issue is.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about people being more, loose or uninhibited when they drink. Alcohol specifically disrupts the part of the brain that assesses threats.
Right.
So people are more likely to misinterpret situations and react aggressively.
60% is a much higher number than I would have guessed. It really kind of underscores the serious consequences of alcohol consumption, particularly in situations that could escalate to violence. I imagine this plays out in domestic violence situations quite a bit too.
You're absolutely right. Alcohol is a significant contributing factor in domestic violence cases.
Hmm.
That impaired judgment and increased aggression we talked about.
Hmm.
It can very easily turn a heated argument into a physical altercation.
That makes sense. That statistic reminds me of a story I read a while back about a young man who, after a night of heavy drinking, got behind the wheel of a car and caused a fatal accident. It really brought home the point that these aren't just numbers, they represent real lives shattered because of alcohol.
Absolutely. Think about DUIs, driving under the influence. Research shows that drunk driving accounts for nearly 30% of all traffic-related deaths.
Wow.
That's a significant number of lives lost or forever altered because of alcohol. And the ripple effect goes far beyond the immediate victims. Families are torn apart, communities suffer, and the economic burden on healthcare and law enforcement is immense.
It's easy to get caught up in those statistics and lose sight of the human cost. Do you have any particular stories that stick with you that really illustrate the devastating impact of alcohol-fueled crime?
There was a case a few years back I'll never forget. A young man, heavily intoxicated, got behind the wheel after a night out. He lost control and crashed into a family driving home from a vacation.
Mm.
The parents died instantly, and their 2 young children were seriously injured.
That's awful.
The young man's life, of course, was irrevocably changed, haunted by the consequences. It was just a stark reminder of the tragic ripple effects of alcohol-related crime.
Yeah. What stands out to you from a psychological perspective about that particular case?
What's particularly tragic in cases like this is that the perpetrator often doesn't set out to cause harm.
Right.
They're simply not thinking clearly due to the effects of alcohol.
Yeah.
It really underscores the importance of understanding how alcohol impacts the brain and making responsible decisions.
That's a really good point. So we've talked about alcohol's role in crime, but what about drugs? How do they fit into this complex picture?
Different drugs have different effects on behavior, making their connection to crime quite complex.
Hmm.
But before we delve into specifics, I think it's important to understand that addiction itself is a disease, and it can drive individuals to desperate measures.
That's a really important point. It's easy to kind of judge someone who's committing crimes to fuel their addiction, but it's crucial to remember that addiction fundamentally changes the way the brain works, creating that overwhelming compulsion to obtain and use drugs.
Exactly. And this desperation can have a devastating ripple effect on families and communities. We see this in the alarming statistics. Studies reveal that drug use is linked to nearly 50% of all property crimes in some regions.
Wow, that's a staggering figure. And I can only imagine the impact on the victims of those crimes. But let's try to break down the specific effects of different drugs on behavior. For instance, how do heroin, meth, and cocaine each contribute to crime in their own way?
So heroin, for example, is an opioid that, while producing euphoria and pain relief, is highly addictive. People addicted to heroin often turn to theft or prostitution to fund their habits, creating a cycle of criminal activity.
Right.
Methamphetamine, on the other hand, is a stimulant that can cause paranoia, aggression, and even hallucinations.
Yeah.
This can lead to violent outbursts and other unpredictable behaviors that often result in criminal charges.
Okay.
And cocaine, another stimulant, can also trigger aggression and impulsivity, making individuals more prone to engaging in risky and illegal activities.
So while all three drugs can lead to criminal behavior, the motivations behind those crimes can be quite different.
Precisely. Sometimes the crimes are directly driven by the effects of the drug itself, like meth-induced paranoia leading to violence. But often the crimes are committed out of desperation to fuel the addiction. Think about someone addicted to heroin who's going through withdrawal. They'll do almost anything to get their next fix.
So it's not always a simple case of drugs make people do bad things. The relationship between substance use and crime is far more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors. And understanding those nuances is essential if we want to develop effective solutions.
I'm really glad we're digging into those nuances in this deep dive. It's helping me to see this issue with a fresh perspective.
I'm glad to hear that, because only by understanding the complexities can we hope to make a real difference.
So we've been unpacking the science behind how these substances impact brain function, leading to actions that might not occur sober. But this isn't just a personal struggle. What are the wider consequences of substance-fueled crime on our society and our economy?
The impact is enormous, both in human and in financial terms. Substance-fueled crime erodes the fabric of communities. It breeds fear and distrust. It also places a huge strain on our healthcare and law enforcement systems, diverting resources that could be used elsewhere.
Right, and we've already touched on that heartbreaking toll on families, but what about the broader economic consequences? Are there any statistics that really kind of drive home the scale of the problem?
The numbers are truly staggering. The U.S., for example, spends over $740 billion annually on issues related to substance abuse.
Wow.
That includes healthcare costs, lost productivity, and criminal justice expenses. It's a massive figure that really highlights the ripple effect of this issue on our economy as a whole.
It's almost impossible to grasp the true scale of $740 billion. It makes you wonder, what are some effective ways to address this problem from both a prevention and a rehabilitation standpoint?
Yeah, it's a complex issue with no easy answers, but there are promising strategies that can make a real difference. On the prevention side, education is key. We need to start early educating young people about the dangers of alcohol and drug use.
That makes sense. You're probably familiar with the Just Say No campaigns of the past.
Yeah.
Have those types of programs actually been successful? I'm curious how effective those education programs are compared to, say, stricter regulations or law enforcement approaches.
While Just Say No had good intentions, research shows that those scare tactic approaches are often ineffective.
Okay.
Modern drug education programs are much more nuanced.
Okay.
They focus on equipping young people with the skills to resist peer pressure, manage stress, and make healthy choices. It's not just about saying no, but about understanding the why and having the tools to navigate those difficult situations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about empowering young people to make informed decisions, rather than simply dictating what they should or shouldn't do. But what about those who are already struggling with addiction? What are some of the most effective rehabilitation strategies?
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to rehabilitation, but several evidence-based treatments have proven successful. One is medication-assisted treatment, which uses medications to manage withdrawal symptoms and cravings.
So like methadone.
Right. These aren't just substitutes for the drug.
Okay.
Medications like methadone target the same brain receptors as opioids, reducing cravings and withdrawal symptoms without the high, allowing people to focus on therapy and rebuilding their lives.
So it's about providing that bridge to recovery, a way to manage those intense physical symptoms while working on the underlying psychological factors. What other types of therapies are used in conjunction with medication?
Behavioral therapies are crucial.
Hmm.
These therapies help individuals develop coping mechanisms, address underlying psychological issues, and learn how to manage triggers and cravings. It's about giving them the tools and strategies to stay sober in the long term.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach tackling both the physical and psychological aspects of addiction. But what about the support system outside of a clinical setting? What role can family and friends play in helping someone through recovery?
Support from family and friends is absolutely critical. Knowing you have people in your corner who believe in you and are there to help can make all the difference. Support groups can also be incredibly valuable, providing a space for people to connect with others who understand what they're going through and share their experiences.
It makes sense that having that sense of community and shared experience can be incredibly powerful.
I know you've spoken before about the role of faith in recovery. How does that fit into this picture?
Yeah, faith can provide a sense of hope, purpose, and community that's often essential in the recovery process. It can offer a source of strength and guidance during difficult times. For many, turning to a higher power provides a sense of peace and acceptance that's crucial for healing. That reminds me of something I read recently about the impact of mindfulness and meditation on addiction recovery. Apparently, practices like meditation can help rewire the brain's reward pathways and reduce cravings. I'm curious if you've seen that in your work.
Absolutely. Mindfulness and meditation have become increasingly important in addiction recovery.
Okay.
These practices help individuals become more aware of their thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations, which can be crucial for managing cravings and triggers. It's about learning to observe those urges without judgment and developing healthier coping mechanisms.
So it's about building that mental resilience and the ability to kind of ride out those difficult moments without giving in to cravings. It's fascinating how much our understanding of addiction and recovery has evolved.
It really has. And this evolution has led to the development of some incredibly effective rehabilitation programs.
Okay.
One program I'm familiar with combines evidence-based therapies with a strong emphasis on community support. They offer individual and group counseling, job training, life skills development, and even help with housing and transportation.
Yeah.
But what really sets them apart is their focus on building a strong sense of community among the participants. They create a safe and supportive environment where people feel understood and encouraged, which is so crucial for long-term recovery.
It's great to hear about programs that are taking such a holistic approach. They recognize that addiction is often a symptom of deeper societal issues and that addressing those underlying factors is key to successful recovery. Have you seen people turn their lives around through this program?
Absolutely. They have a remarkably high success rate, with many graduates leading productive, fulfilling lives, free from addiction. I remember working with a young woman who had been caught shoplifting to support her heroin addiction. She was estranged from her family, had lost custody of her children, and was living on the streets. Her story was heartbreaking, but it also held a glimmer of hope. She eventually entered this rehabilitation program, and with a lot of support, managed to turn her life around.
That's great.
Today, she's sober, reunited with her family, and working to help others struggling with addiction.
That's an incredible story. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, there's always a possibility of redemption. It also highlights the vital role of support systems, from faith communities to rehabilitation programs, in providing the tools and encouragement needed for lasting change. Are there any other success stories that stand out to you?
There are so many. I've witnessed firsthand the transformative power of recovery. Each individual's journey is unique, but the common thread is the courage to seek help and the resilience to keep fighting for a better life.
It's inspiring to hear about those triumphs. It's easy to get bogged down in the negativity surrounding substance abuse and crime, but these stories remind us that there's always hope.
Exactly. It's important to celebrate those successes, to highlight the stories of hope and recovery, because ultimately those stories are what fuel our efforts and inspire us to keep working towards a better future.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the science of addiction to the devastating impacts of substance-fueled crime. But now I'm really interested in exploring the other side of the coin, those incredible stories of resilience and recovery.
Yeah, those stories are truly the heart of this issue.
Yeah.
They remind us that change is possible even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Mm.
They show us that recovery is not just about individual healing, but about the restoration of families, communities, and hope itself.
Exactly. And I think those stories are what our listeners need to hear. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the statistics and the complexities, but hearing about real people who've overcome addiction can be incredibly inspiring and empowering.
Absolutely. These stories really demonstrate the power of the human spirit and the transformative potential of support, compassion, and belief in oneself.
Well, I'm all ears. What are some of the stories that have really stuck with you that exemplify this power of recovery?
One that immediately comes to mind is Sarah's story. Sarah struggled with heroin addiction for years, and her life was in complete disarray. She had lost her job, her home, and even custody of her children. She was caught in a cycle of crime stealing to support her habit and ending up in and out of jail.
It's hard to imagine hitting such a low point. What was it that finally led her to seek help? Was there like a specific event, or was it more of a gradual realization?
For Sarah, it was a combination of factors. While serving one of her jail sentences, she just hit rock bottom. The reality of her situation, the pain she'd caused herself and her loved ones became impossible to ignore. She was also exposed to a faith-based program offered within the prison, and something about it just resonated with her.
That's interesting. I'm curious to know more about how faith played a role in her recovery. Was it something she'd always been connected to, or was it a new discovery for her?
It was a reawakening of sorts.
Mm.
Sarah had grown up with some religious background, but it had really fallen by the wayside during her years of addiction. The program provided a structure, a sense of community, and a connection to something bigger than herself that she'd been craving.
So it wasn't just about abstaining from drugs. It was about finding a new path, a sense of purpose and belonging.
Exactly. Through prayer meditation and the support of the community, Sarah began to heal.
Mhm.
The program helped her develop coping mechanisms, address her underlying trauma, and rediscover her own strength.
It's amazing how faith can provide that kind of inner strength and support, especially during those difficult early stages of recovery. What happened once she was released from prison? Was she able to maintain that momentum?
It wasn't easy, but she was determined.
Mm.
She continued attending support groups, connecting with her faith community, and working with a therapist. Most importantly, she fought hard to regain custody of her children, and eventually she succeeded.
That's fantastic. It's a testament to her commitment to change and the power of second chances. Do you ever get to see her now? What's her life like today?
I do, and it's truly inspiring. Sarah has been sober for several years now. She's rebuilt her life. She's a loving and present mother to her children, and she's even become an advocate for others struggling with addiction. She uses her experience to help guide and inspire others, showing them that recovery is possible even from the darkest depths.
Her story is such a powerful reminder that there's always hope and it's never too late to turn things around. It also highlights the vital role of support systems, from faith communities to rehabilitation programs, in providing the tools and encouragement needed for lasting change. Do you have any other stories that illustrate the transformative power of support systems?
Absolutely. David's story is another powerful example of how families can make all the difference. David struggled with alcoholism for years, and it was tearing his family apart. His wife was at her wit's end, and his children were growing increasingly distant and resentful.
That sounds like a really heartbreaking situation for everyone involved. What was the turning point for David?
One evening, after a particularly bad incident where David blacked out and became verbally abusive, his family decided they couldn't just stand by and watch him self-destruct. They staged an intervention.
Interventions can be tricky. They often evoke a lot of defensiveness and resistance. How did David react?
It was a very emotional experience for everyone involved, but ultimately it was a turning point. His family expressed their love for him, but also their unwavering commitment to supporting him in getting sober. They made it clear that they wouldn't enable his addiction any longer, but they would be there for him every step of the way if he chose recovery.
So it wasn't an ultimatum,
Hmm.
but a powerful declaration of love and support.
Exactly. And hearing that from his loved ones, seeing their pain and their determination was a wake-up call for David. He realized the extent of the damage his drinking was causing, not just to himself, but to the people he loved most in the world.
That's a profound realization, and it often takes a powerful catalyst like an intervention to bring it to the surface. What steps did David take towards recovery after that intervention?
He agreed to enter a rehabilitation program, and his family was actively involved in his recovery process. They attended therapy sessions with him, encouraged him to join a support group, and held him accountable for his sobriety.
So it was a true team effort with everyone working together towards a common goal. What about David's relationship with his family? Did it start to heal as he progressed in his recovery?
Absolutely. As David started to get sober and work on himself, the walls that had been built up between him and his family began to crumble. They started to communicate more openly and honestly. And slowly but surely, trust and love started to rebuild.
It's amazing how recovery can be a catalyst, not just for individual healing, but for the healing of entire families.
It's a beautiful testament to the power of forgiveness, compassion, and the enduring strength of family bonds. And David's story doesn't end there. Today, years later, he's still sober. His relationship with his family is stronger than ever, and he's become a mentor to others in recovery, sharing his experience and offering support to those who are just starting their journey.
It's amazing how these stories of recovery, like Sarah's and David's, often become stories of giving back, of helping others find their own path to healing. It speaks to the ripple effect of positive change and the transformative power of hope.
I couldn't agree more. These stories are a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that even small acts of kindness, compassion, and support can have a profound impact on someone's life.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final takeaway you'd like to leave our listener with?
I think the most important message is that recovery is possible. It's a journey that requires courage, resilience, and support, but it's a journey worth taking. And for anyone listening who might be struggling with addiction or knows someone who is, please remember that you're not alone. There are resources available, there are people who care, and there is always hope.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise in these powerful stories with us. I think our listeners have gained invaluable insights into the complex relationship between substance abuse crime and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with a deeper understanding of this issue and perhaps even sparked a sense of hope and possibility. Remember, change is possible, recovery is possible, and a brighter future is within reach.